black pain, now we free from them chains. Heavy hearts, but we moving through the rain. Three black brothers with the weight on their minds. Till we rise, till we shine, still we grind. From the darkness to the light we claim. Still humble in the struggle, still proud of our name.
All right, welcome back to episode 2. We have a very special guest with us today, Don Carter. We are going to be talking about how we can unlearn the survival mode. And before we get started, I have 2 questions that I want to ask you, Don, here. First of all, I would like to thank you for coming on, as being a guest. I'm always appreciative of that. So the 2 questions that I want to ask you before we actually get started was, what are some things that you're doing to work on your mental health right now? And how long have you been doing that?
Well, when I think of mental health, and first of all, thank you for inviting me here. It's always a pleasure to be able to have such dialogue where we're digging deep into what these things mean that we as Black men, as human beings experience, and how we can increase our mental wellness. And that's really what I think about when I hear mental health. Health can be good or bad depending on where you are on the spectrum. And so I like to talk about mental well-being. And so that is where we're being very specific about how to be well with our mental capabilities and our mental processes. And mental wellness to me is about being in a state of rest and peace more than being activated into suffering and mental suffering. And there's a lot that goes into that. And I'm not a clinician, so I don't speak on these things as anybody authoritative, but my experiences have been such that I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of how to maintain peace. And what practices that I do for that looks like giving myself space. So we live in a world where it feels like there's always something to do, always somewhere to give our attention. Life is, and the systems that are out here are always trying to grab our attention. I believe that attention is the most valuable asset that we have. It's our very being and where we're focusing that being. And so where we give our attention is the biggest thing. And in my former career in law enforcement, when I was a detective, I stopped watching the news. And I know people feel like generally you got to stay informed, you got to be in the know, especially people who are professionals feel like they want to be alert to what's going on in the world. But if you recognize what's happening, that you're just being activated into a fear response, which is biological. And so being able to abstain from those things, to step away from those things for a period of time is one of the biggest ways that I've maintained a sense of peace and therefore mental wellness. And so it's been a lot of years now since I really watched the news, and I haven't had those spikes of adrenaline or spikes of anxiety that come from watching something and somebody telling me that I should be worried about it or that it's terrible. And the second part is really just recognizing that life is actually good. And so when people are up in arms about what's going on in the news or in politics or in their own lives, I just remind them, just look out the window. Bro, just look out the window. If you feel like the world is a very terrible place, I dare you to just look out your window. And you'll see that life is relatively peaceful most of the time. And so it's not anything that's out there that's causing me to have the angst in here. It's only what's happening in here. And so us living from the inside out is another principle that helps me maintain that peace. So when something is triggering or when something makes me rattled in some way, I know it's not about what's out there as much as it's about what's in here. And so I can focus here. And the best way that I found to reorient that is just to breathe. We have a really real physiological mechanism that helps us regulate our nervous system, and that's the breath. And so it's happening automatically, but when you take control of it and actually do it in a way that's methodical, you can take 5 minutes and just breathe, and you will feel better just letting that process do its thing. And so that's what I do to maintain a level of mental wellness is I detach from the constant, I guess, triggers that happen in even advertising. It's telling you that you need something that you are being shown, or your life's going to be better with it, and it's going to be worse without it. These are just all ways that we've been conditioned to keep that heightened response. And when we live there, it's tough. And so detaching from it first, and then just being, breathing, it's the simplest stuff. So that's how I'm in my wellness.
And that's wonderful, brother, that you're taking care of your health on that magnitude. And the reason why I asked that question is because there's a lot of stress that's going on in the world. And people feel like they have to survive just with other people's thoughts or beliefs and stuff like that. But when you learn to block out the noise from the inside out, it can really protect your mental health. Because I know a brother that used to always worried about everything. He was always on the go. He was like, this, I need to do that. I need to do this. Just always in that panic or survival mode that he just kind of forgot himself. I'm like, brother, don't learn to chill. You're making me have anxiety. Just always.
That's the funny part.
Yeah.
The way that we operate is that we're contagious. We're always sharing the energy that we are emitting from the inside out. And so there's not necessarily stress going on out there. It's only going on in here. And it's due to what I've perceived and decided to believe about what's going on out there, or about what's going on in here. And so it's still just from the inside out. But depending on which way I go, I will impact the people around me. And so talking to that person, you're literally absorbing some of their energy, especially somebody like you, who is probably very empathetic and very caring and want to help, which is the reason that you even launched this podcast, is to just help other people. And so that's a great thing to recognize, is that we're constantly sharing the energy that we actually generate internally. And so if I want to be well, then I can start with myself, and then I'm able to actually overflow that to other people in the midst of seeming chaos.
So speaking about survival mode, how do we learn to undo the things that we learn? When I was growing up, my mother would always tell me, oh, we don't have enough money for this, or we don't have enough money for that, or you can't get that. And then as you grow up, you start to develop unhealthy habits with money or friendships or just relationships in general, that you become complacent in this mode of, if I don't do this for that person, they're going to leave me. Or I don't work hard on that job, they're going to fire me. Or if I don't cater to that relationship or tend to my wife or spouse or whatever better than I am now, she's going to leave me. So how can we unlearn those unhealthy habits of just always being on grind and worrying about the people?
You got to consider a couple of things. One, what is survival and what is it for? And so if you're surviving, what's happening? What's happening when you're surviving?
You have the basic necessities. I think you have a roof over your head, your bills is paid, you can eat. I think that's the basic necessities that you need to survive, right?
Okay. I would imagine that it's somewhat subjective, but just the idea of surviving implies that there's something that's threatening my life, like that I'm under threat to die. So I got to survive. I got to hold on. I got to make sure I have the bare minimum in order to survive. And that could be different for different people. But survival, the idea is about maintaining life under threat of death. That's the basic thing. So when I'm in survival mode all the time, I'm doing all the things that I'm doing so that I can actually keep living. But let me ask you this question, and I want you to think about it and then just answer it for yourself. When has there ever been a time in your life where you didn't have what you needed and more?
That's a good question. I think the time that I didn't have anything in my life was my father.
So listen, the question is very specific, and this is for the listeners too. When have you ever had a time in your life, or when was there a time in your life when you didn't have what you need and more? When was there ever a time where you didn't have what you needed? So the question in and of itself causes you to have to survey your whole life. But there's a very simple answer, right? If I'm talking to you and you are here to hear the question, then the reality of your experience is that you've had everything you've needed and more all the time. Because if you didn't, I wouldn't even be here talking to you. You wouldn't even be here for me to talk to. So you have already survived 100% of everything that you've experienced. Is that because you were in survival mode, or is that just because you are in a state where there is more than enough for what you need? So that's the first question. It's this question of scarcity versus abundance. There either being not enough or more than enough. And if any of y'all who's watching this or listening to this can hear me and you are aware of yourself and you're thinking about what I'm asking, you have survived everything that you've experienced so far. Now, was that because you were constantly on the grind and constantly trying to make it? Or is it just because life is doing what life does and taking care of you enough for you to be here still?
Yeah, and that was a very tough question. Even I had to pause and think about, man, where do I go? Do I talk about the trauma, or do I talk about just regular things that happen to me in my everyday life? And that was a very hard question.
You may have experienced challenges, trials, traumas, all the stuff. You experienced hard things. But when was there ever a time you didn't have what you needed and more?
You already had everything you needed. You just didn't know it.
There's never been a time you didn't have what you needed and more. Ever. Because you're here. So if that's true, and I'm submitting to you that it's true, what sense does it make to project the idea of a future where you won't have everything you need and more? What sense does it make to be afraid of experiencing life in a way where you don't have what you need and more? It's never happened. So it literally doesn't make any good sense for you to think that it's going to happen in the future and try to make sure it doesn't happen right now. That's what puts us in that grind mode. That's what puts us in that survival mode. It's that I'm under threat of dying and I got to get it. I got to hustle. I got to fight. But is it true?
I get it. And I'm going to challenge you a little bit here.
Please do.
Just from another perspective. I see a lot of Black men, they grow up in the hood, and they feel like they have to do certain things to survive in their life.
Sure.
And they might grow up with a single mother that barely is getting by, and she's putting a lot of pressure on them to go to school, get a good education, or accept that college basketball scholarship that's going to really get them out of the hood and get to the next level in life. But the men that I talk to on a regular, consistently basis, I've seen some wealthy men, and then I also seen some people that grew up like me, struggling, trying to survive in a single mother parent household. So I know what you're saying, that we had everything we needed, but we just didn't know that we had it. But there is some men out there that don't have the bare minimum. They maybe don't have enough, don't have a roof over their house, their head, or they maybe living paycheck to paycheck. That's barely surviving. When you put,
According to who?
according to them.
Exactly. That's the point. And so we get back to this idea, the idea of scarcity versus the idea of abundance. And so again, I'm not doubting that there are some really challenging things and some hard stuff. I'll share with you some of the things that I've been through. They feel painful. They feel hard. But does that mean that there's not enough? It's an idea more than it's an experience. The experience is that I've had more than enough to survive already without even having to do much, because that's the way life is. I'm here still. My body is taking care of itself. It knows how to use energy in a way that allows me to keep going. My mind is aware enough that I can do such things, right? So we're going from the difference between my experience and my thoughts. And again, that comes back to this differentiation between scarcity and abundance. Do I believe there's not enough, or do I believe there's more than enough? And that determines how I move. And so if I get into the sense of scarcity, oh, ain't enough out here, I got to take what I can get, I got to make sure, that's a belief. But even the world is a big place. The world is so big and there's so much stuff. Now, access to the stuff might feel challenging. But maybe we just don't understand the access that we already have. Literally, the thing that has allowed me to maintain this is recognizing the very real experience that life is just full of good stuff. And I can understand that because I'm here. And so that actual belief or that understanding gives me the strength and the confidence and the calmness to now go out and create the kind of life that I really desire. Because if you're saying that it's the man who determines whether or not he has enough, you're right. And it's all up here. And so I'm not discounting the fact that we all have very challenging experiences. I'm not discounting the fact that some people have different resources that they think are available to them. I'm from the hood. I grew up being paranoid all the time. I grew up without even knowing my father's name until he called when I was 15. And then he died when I was 28. And he abandoned me again, technically, in that sense, because I won't get into the story because of time, but it felt like abandonment the way that he passed away. It wasn't something it was really hard. And I still struggle with it today, even as I'm parenting my children. I'm becoming aware of these stories that I had that caused me to think that I was lacking. But here's the funny thing. I'll share this. And this was in my mid 30s, late 30s, probably. I used to believe as a young Black boy that not having a father was the worst thing that could happen to me. It's the worst. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, that was the narrative. That's the story. Oh, the Black family, the fathers are all this. They're all in prison. They're dying. They're doing this. And so as a kid, I was conditioned to think, oh, no, I don't have a dad. I'm in the worst scenario. Very typical, right? And then I recognized later on, it was like, oh, I like who I am right now. I like me. So I got to the point of accepting and loving myself in a way. And I recognized that the kind of person that my dad was, if I had had his influence throughout my formative years, I'd be a different me. Mm. And so instead of him not being around being the worst thing that could happen to me, not having my dad is the very best thing that could happen to me, because it allowed me to become what I am today.
Just a little bit louder. I can't.
So not having my dad, the narrative got switched to not having my dad when I was growing up was the best thing that could happen to me, because it helped me become who I am today. I had my mother's influence. I had a loving community around me. I had people, even though we didn't have a lot of money, we still had connection. And so I grew up with the understanding that there's drug addicts in my family. My little brother passed away from drugs at 28. And there's been some hard stuff. I typically speak more freely, but I don't know what your audience is like, so I'm going to say stuff.
It's okay. We talk about controversial things all the time, so
listen,
it's fine. You don't have to filter anything.
I don't have to censor myself. There's some hard shit to deal with. And apparently I'm well equipped to deal with it. Apparently life has given me enough to where I can experience those things and keep moving. And so my point of this is that when it comes to feeling like I'm in survival mode, that is a result of conditioning and then habit and then choice to continue in that habit once I recognize that I'm doing it. So if I'm finding myself burnt out, if I'm finding myself grinding all the time, if I'm finding myself always fighting, all I need to do is ask myself, what am I fighting for so that I can live? I think I'm going to die if I don't do this stuff. I think I'm going to die if I don't have enough money. I think I'm going to die if I don't have enough of whatever it is that I'm feeling I lack.
And you're right. It's all about a mentality thing. Mm-hmm. But I like your perspective about things. But I also, speaking from a young mentality Black person myself that grew up in the hood, didn't have a lot of resources. And I had to literally fight sometimes from people from holding me back because they didn't believe that I can do certain things in my life.
Mm-hmm. So where did you fight? Where did you have that fight? Where was that fight?
It was some internal, and then it was some external.
Let's say you didn't even believe what they said. Let's say you didn't even care what they said. Where's the fight then?
Internally.
It's all inside. We live life from the inside out. And I've decided that the people that I'm talking to in my family or in my sphere have a certain level of authority in my life that when I submit something to them, however they say it is going to shake me. That's a real thing. Like I'm very vulnerable to my wife right now. When she says something, if she feels disappointed or if she feels, it crushes me. It causes me to feel like I'm ashamed of myself in some way. It causes me, and those are echoes from something that's way back. It ain't got nothing to do with her. It's got to do with what I've decided has meaning for me. So that's where the key is. Being in survival mode is just a conditioning. Being Black in America, we've been taught that everything's against you. And so you got to fight to just live. And we have a relatively short history that we know of in this place. And some of that is genetic. It's epigenetics. It's the messages that have come from our ancestors to us. And they had a completely different circumstance than we did. So some of it is reactive because we have the knowledge internally. And yet we're here. And so what kind of people is that can experience all of this stuff and still be in the mode to thriving? The way that I like to put it is that in a matter of a few hundred years in this system, we went from beast of burdens to billionaires. And what kind of people can do that? So those are the things that I hold in my senses that help me realize, yo, I don't have to fight everything to live. Instead, I can be a creator. I can create the kind of life that actually works. And we've seen this over and over again. We've seen this over and over again with people who come from nothing go and do something spectacular. It's people in the neighborhood that come from the same place as you and go two different directions. You have taken whatever your faculties are and decided to create something like this with your homies. This is the reality of what we live in. And our choices are what matter. So first is recognizing I've been conditioned. So there is a level that's just baked in. Then it becomes habit because of that, because I'm just working on autopilot. But once I realize it, once I'll be like, oh, damn, I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of always being anxious. I'm tired of always being like, now I've become aware of those things. Now I got a choice. Do I hold on to the beliefs that got me in this circumstance, or am I willing to let them go? And if I'm willing to let them go, shit feels scary, but there's a whole world of possibility of things that are different than that. And if all I understand is that, look, this ain't working, maybe something else could. And all I'm submitting to you right now is that the belief that there's not enough versus the belief that there's more than enough is going to be the deciding factor. And your life is evidence of the fact that there's been more than enough for you so far because you're still here.
Yes. All right. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. We're coming up on time here. I do appreciate you, Don, for coming on here and being vulnerable and challenging me, my beliefs and my thoughts and stuff like that. I really appreciate that, because that's the type of dialogue that I see every day Black men have. Instead of challenging our beliefs to get us to improve our thought system better, we want to shoot each other when we don't like what we have to believe.
Yeah.
And I believe there's power in being vulnerable and having these conversations and dialogues, because it's going to help somebody that's struggling right now to determine if they take their life or they don't. There's power in being vulnerable and sharing our experiences so we can help other men and save a life. Yeah. Ultimately, we want them to heal.
Absolutely. My last part of that message would be, there is more to you than you realize. So if you're listening to this and things that I say sound crazy or sound off, just take a beat and realize that you are much more than you probably realize at the moment. And so give yourself a shot.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, men, we have to get out of our own way of thinking sometimes, because we hold each other back. Our own thoughts and beliefs about what people told us about each other, and that there's not enough, that we can't create our own tables, that we can't say what we want to say. That's bullshit. We have the power to do anything we want to do in our life. And just because someone else get that big opportunity that we always wanted, doesn't take away that it may not be our time yet. And we have to create our own stuff. We have to keep working and networking with people to get to the opportunities that we want in life. There's no such thing as that. Since he took that opportunity, my life is over with. I don't have any other options.
Right.
It's always another avenue. Leave you guys with
Versus scarcity. Exactly. I love it, man. Appreciate you.
all right. Have a good day, and
Too, man.
I will
Hope
talk
this
to
is-
you. Make sure you subscribe to all of our channels, and
Yep.
and make sure you share links to on the LinkedIn.
Right on. We'll do.
See you.
All right. Peace.
Now we're free from